I was washing dishes when I noticed the empty space on my hand. The thin white mark where my wedding ring used to sit felt like a wound. I froze, soap dripping down my fingers, heart pounding in my chest. My ring was gone. For 42 years, that ring had never left my finger. Through the birth of my son, through my husband's funeral, through every joy and heartbreak that life threw at me, I wore it even when I slept. It was more than gold. It was history. It was love. It was my promise to Samuel that I would never let go. When I turned to ask my daughter-in-law Naomi if she had seen it, her answer came too quickly. Maybe you misplaced it, Evelyn. You're getting older, it happens. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes slid away from mine. That was when the first seed of doubt bloomed in my chest. 3 days later, I saw her flaunting a new diamond bracelet. It glimmered in the sunlight while she bragged to her friend on the phone about how easy it was to fix her financial troubles. My heart went cold. The timing, the money, the lie. It all connected. She had sold my wedding ring. Before I confronted her, I decided to do something she would never expect. Because that ring wasn't just mine, it belonged to the women who came before me. And I was going to let her learn exactly what she had done. But before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where you are listening from. Are you in your kitchen, in your car, maybe folding laundry or getting ready for bed? Tell me in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, subscribe right now. We share real stories every single day. Stories about betrayal, truth, and what happens when someone underestimates the wrong woman. My name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the story of how my daughter-in-law sold my wedding ring and learned the truth the hard way. I live in a small yellow house on the east side of Savannah, the one Samuel and I bought in 1981 when interest rates were sky high and our dreams were bigger than our pockets. The porch sags a little now, and the paint on the railing is chipped, but the jasmine Samuel planted still wraps around the posts every spring. When the breeze comes in off the river, it carries the smell of salt and flowers right into my living room. My son Marcus grew up in that house. He took his first steps on those hardwood floors. He learned to ride his first bike up and down this street. When Samuel had his first heart attack, the ambulance lights flashed against these windows. When we buried him, this is where the casseroles came, where the church ladies sat and prayed with me until I could stand again. Now Marcus lives across town with his wife, Naomi, and their daughter, my sweet Tiana. They have a new build in a development with a gate and a code, all straight lines and grey paint and stainless steel. Their house looks like it came straight out of a catalogue. Everything in it says new, shiny, untouched. Naomi likes it that way. Naomi and I are two different kinds of women. I came up on double shifts and call lights, wiping brows and holding hands that were about to leave this world. She came up on open houses and commission checks, selling people their dream kitchens and walk-in closets. She likes things polished and staged. I like things worn in and honest. From the beginning, she was polite to me. Never outright rude. Just distant. Careful. Like she was handling something fragile that she did not really want but could not drop. She would hug me with one arm. Call me Evelyn instead of Mama or Miss Evelyn. Compliment my dress in a way that was really a suggestion for something better. That color is nice on you. You know, a structured blazer would elevate it. Marcus would laugh it off. Naomi is just into style, Ma. You know how real estate folks are. I knew. I also knew when someone thought they were better than where they came from. Still, I tried. I brought sweet potato pies to their housewarming. I watched Tiana on Fridays so Naomi could show houses late. I sat on their white couch with my hands folded, afraid to touch anything because I did not want to be the first stain in a house full of white. Tiana was my joy. 10 years old, all legs and bright eyes, with my mama's dimple on her left cheek. She would run into my arms yelling, "Grandma Eve," and the whole world would feel right again. Naomi liked having me as free childcare. That part was clear. Evelyn, can you keep Tiana overnight this weekend? I have an out-of-town client. Evelyn, can you pick her up from school? Traffic is crazy near the office. Evelyn, I forgot to defrost anything. Do you have some of that chicken stew you can send back with Marcus? I never said no. That is what family does. That is what Samuel would have wanted. We help our own. Sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, they would all come to my house for dinner. Not often, but enough to keep hope alive. I would make fried chicken, rice and gravy, green beans with smoked turkey, and of course my cornbread. Marcus would sit at the head of the table like Samuel used to, and for a few hours I could pretend our little world was still intact. Naomi would come in wearing perfume that smelled expensive and a dress that did not have room for second helpings. She would glance at my worn tablecloth, my old mismatched plates, the steam rising from my pots, and give me that smile. The one that said she approved of me in theory but not in practice. It smells very homey in here, Evelyn. Homey. Another one of those words that can cut if you listen too closely. One Sunday she brought a quinoa salad in a glass bowl and set it on the table like a peace offering and a challenge. Something a little lighter, she said. For balance. Marcus piled his plate with my food first, then added a spoon of hers like a courtesy. Tiana took one bite of the quinoa, chewed, then looked at my mac and cheese like it was a lifeboat. Can I have more of Grandma's instead? Naomi's lips tightened. She did not say anything, but I saw it. The flicker of annoyance. The way her eyes went straight to me, then back to Tiana, like I had broken some unspoken rule. That was the first night I noticed Naomi's jewelry. The big gold hoop earrings. The dainty chain with a tiny diamond. The tennis bracelet that caught the light when she reached for the pepper. She liked expensive things. That part was obvious. Her Instagram, when I finally learned how to look at it, was full of them. Brunch plates, handbags, open house selfies, captions about manifesting luxury and living soft. Nothing wrong with wanting nice things, Marcus would say. Naomi works hard. I never argued. I just wondered what happened when wanting nice things ran faster than the money in the bank. About 6 months before my ring disappeared, I started to notice little cracks. Naomi would be on the phone late at night when I was there with Tiana. Her voice would drop when she walked into another room. I told you I would have it by Friday. No, I cannot ask my husband again. He does not know about that card. Her laughter online was loud and carefree. Her voice on those calls was thin and strained. One afternoon, I was folding laundry at their house while Tiana did homework at the table. Naomi's purse was open on the counter. I did not go through it. That is not who I am. But I could not unsee the red letters at the top of the bill sticking out. Past due. Later that night, Naomi asked Marcus about a bonus he was expecting. You said your hours picked up. Did the extra pay hit yet? Not yet, he said. And whatever comes in first is going toward the car note. We are already behind. Her jaw flexed. She smiled through it, but that smile did not touch her eyes. We will figure it out, she said. We always do. The thing about pressure is that it makes people show who they really are. Some folks bend and pray. Others look around for something to sell. At that time, I still believed Naomi fell into the first group. I believed she would tighten her belt, hustle harder, cut back on brunch and handbags. I had no idea she was about to look at my hand and see a solution. Naomi and I lived in two different worlds that kept colliding. She loved perfect order and modern luxury, while I loved things that carried stories. Every time I stepped into her spotless kitchen, I felt like a drop of color in a world that only wanted white and silver. Yet, for the sake of Marcus and my granddaughter Tiana, I tried to keep the peace. Naomi would always greet me with that same polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was polite, careful, and distant. Evelyn, could you please not use the cast iron pan? It scratches the stovetop, she would say, handing me a non-stick pan like I was a child in her kitchen. I swallowed my pride, smiled back, and kept helping. Marcus didn't see it. He thought we got along fine. You two just come from different worlds, he said once, brushing it off. Maybe he was right, but I knew tension when I felt it. Naomi didn't want me in her space. She tolerated me because I was useful. I cooked Sunday dinners, folded laundry, and helped Tiana with homework when Naomi was showing houses. I did it with love, but every favor felt like one more reminder that I didn't belong. Then came the day she asked about my ring. "That's such a lovely piece," she said while setting the table. "Vintage, right? Must be worth quite a bit." I smiled, twisting the gold band gently. "It's priceless to me," I said. "My husband gave it to me 42 years ago. It belonged to his grandmother before that." She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on it longer than necessary. That moment stayed with me. A week later, I realized the ring was gone. My heart stopped. I searched every drawer, every pocket, every corner of the house. Nothing. When I asked Naomi if she'd seen it, her response was too smooth, too quick. "Maybe you misplaced it, Evelyn. You've been so busy lately." I wanted to believe her, but the unease wouldn't leave me. And when she showed up the next day with a new diamond bracelet glinting in the light, I felt something inside me shift. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't carelessness. It was betrayal dressed in silk. A few days after my wedding ring disappeared, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I'd taken it off while washing dishes. Maybe it rolled under a dresser or slipped between the couch cushions. But deep down, I knew better. That ring had never left my finger in over 4 decades. One afternoon, while helping Naomi fold Tiana's laundry, I saw an envelope sticking out of her purse on the counter. It wasn't my place to pry, but the name printed on it froze me. Goldline Jewelers. My heart thudded so loud I thought Naomi might hear it from the next room. That was Samuel's jeweler. The same little shop where he'd bought the ring in 1978, saving for months just to afford it. I still remembered the owner, Mr. Kaplan, and the way his hands trembled slightly when he handed Samuel the velvet box. I waited until Naomi left for a showing, then drove straight to Goldline. The bell above the door jingled just the same as it had all those years ago. Behind the counter stood a younger man, maybe Mr. Kaplan's son. I asked if anyone had sold them a gold vintage ring with a small sapphire center. He checked his computer, nodded, and said, "Yes, ma'am. Brought in just last week." It sold fast. Beautiful craftsmanship. The seller's name was Naomi Carter. My knees went weak. I had to hold the counter to steady myself. "Do you know who bought it?" He shook his head. "A private collector. Paid in cash. We don't share client details." I walked out of that store in a daze, the spring air suddenly heavy. The streets of Savannah looked the same, oak trees swaying, Spanish moss dancing, but my world had shifted. When I pulled into Marcus's driveway, Naomi's car was parked out front. She stepped out holding shopping bags, her diamond bracelet flashing in the sunlight. She smiled like nothing had happened. "Evelyn, you look tired. Long day." I forced a smile. "You have no idea." That night, I sat alone in my living room, holding the empty spot on my finger, and whispered to the silence, "You picked the wrong woman to steal from, Naomi." Because that ring wasn't just gold and sapphire. It was my life story. And I was about to make sure she learned exactly whose hands she'd stolen history from. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise with a plan already forming. Years in nursing had taught me how to stay calm under pressure, how to keep my emotions buried until the time was right. I brewed my coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the spot on my hand where the ring used to shine. Samuel's voice echoed in my memory. "Eve, that ring carries the stories of the women who came before you. Never let it leave the family." He'd said it the night he proposed, down by the river under the old magnolia tree. I had laughed then, thinking he meant it as romance. But now I realized it had been a warning. Naomi hadn't just stolen jewelry. She had stolen a legacy. Instead of confronting her, I decided to let her feel comfortable. Safe even. I cooked Sunday dinner like usual, pretending nothing was wrong. Fried chicken, sweet potatoes, biscuits fresh from the oven. The smell filled the house, and soon Naomi was in my kitchen, pretending to help. "Everything smells wonderful, Evelyn," she said sweetly, her voice dripping in honey. "I don't know how you manage to cook like this every week." I smiled. "Practice, dear. Some things can't be bought." She laughed, not realizing the truth buried in my words. Marcus came in, wrapping me in a hug. "Ma, we missed you last week. You okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Just had some errands." I looked right at Naomi when I said it. As we ate, I watched her fingers flash with new jewelry. A sleek gold bracelet, diamond studs, that same new confidence people get when they think they've gotten away with something. When dinner was over, I offered dessert. Peach cobbler, Naomi's favorite. She smiled and helped herself to a big slice. "Naomi," I said casually, pouring sweet tea, "did you ever hear of the Kaplan family over on Broughton Street? They own that old jewelry store downtown." Her fork froze midair. "Oh no, can't say I have." I nodded slowly. "Funny. I went there this week. Turns out they remember me after all these years. Said they'd seen a ring just like mine, Samuel's family ring. Even knew the name of the seller." Her hand trembled just slightly, barely enough to notice, but I saw it. "I'm sure that's just a coincidence," she said quickly. "Maybe," I said, smiling sweetly. "But you know what's strange? The buyer didn't keep it long. He returned it after learning who it belonged to. Said it carried a story that shouldn't be sold." Naomi looked up, her face pale. "That's the thing about family heirlooms," I said quietly. "They always find their way home." And as her perfect composure cracked, I knew my plan was working. Sunday dinner at Marcus and Naomi's house was always the same. Elegant dishes, white linen napkins, and that air of polite distance Naomi wore like perfume. But that evening, I had something special planned. The dining table shimmered with candles and silverware. Christmas lights framed the window even though it wasn't December. Naomi liked everything to sparkle when guests came over. Marcus's co-workers were there, along with a few neighbors. It was the perfect audience. Naomi was radiant as usual, dressed in a cream silk blouse and gold earrings that gleamed under the chandelier. She looked every bit the successful realtor's wife. I'd brought my famous roast, which she'd graciously accepted. Anything to look like a generous hostess in front of guests. Dinner went smoothly at first. Conversation buzzed about new houses on the market, promotions, and vacations in Cabo. Naomi thrived in these moments, where she could show off her charm and her perfect life. Then Marcus raised a toast. "To family, love, and new memories," he said, smiling. "And to my mother, who makes every meal taste like home." Everyone clapped politely. Naomi smiled too, though I could see the tension in her jaw. She liked control, and Marcus's attention was a currency she guarded fiercely. As plates were cleared and dessert was served, I decided the moment had come. "Naomi," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear, "remember when you asked about my wedding ring a few weeks ago?" The chatter quieted instantly. Naomi froze mid-sip of her wine. "Oh, yes, I think so. I lost it not long after that," I continued. "It was a ring from my husband, Samuel. Been in our family since 1923. His grandmother wore it through the Depression. His mother wore it through the civil rights marches. Each woman who had it promised to pass it down to the next generation, with love, not greed." The room was silent now. Even Marcus's fork hovered in midair. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small velvet box. "Funny thing," I said, opening it slowly. "I thought it was gone forever. But Mr. Kaplan's grandson at Goldline Jewelers called me. Said the buyer brought it back. Couldn't wear something that carried so much history." Naomi's face went pale, her hand trembling around her wine glass. "Evelyn, I met her eyes. Do you know what the buyer said before returning it? He said it didn't feel right wearing a ring that belonged to a woman who built her life with honesty and love. He said it deserved to be with the family it was meant for." Marcus turned to her. "Naomi, What is she talking about? Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I slipped the ring back onto my finger, the gold catching the light. This ring survived wars, loss, and generations of women stronger than greed. But it also carries truth, and the truth always comes home. Naomi's tears came then, quiet but visible. Her perfect mask had cracked. The guests looked away, embarrassed for her, but I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. Because some lessons aren't taught with anger, they're taught with grace. Marcus didn't say a word for what felt like a full minute. He just stared at Naomi, disbelief spreading across his face like a slow sunrise of realization. The man who always defended his wife, who brushed off my quiet warnings with a weary smile, was finally seeing her for who she really was. "Naomi," he said finally, his voice tight but calm, "tell me this isn't true." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Marcus, I was going to replace it. I just needed the money for." "For what?" He cut her off, his tone low but fierce. "For new clothes? More decorations? You sold my father's wedding ring? The one my mother has worn for over 40 years. Tiana, who had been sitting silently beside me, put her fork down. "Mom, you didn't really do that, did you?" Naomi looked between them, her husband, her daughter, her mother-in-law, and realized there was no sympathy left in the room. "I made a mistake," she whispered, tears forming. I thought it was just jewelry." "It was never just jewelry," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "It was a piece of my father, of our family. And you treated it like a pawn ticket." The guests had gone quiet, trying not to intrude, but the air was thick with tension. I stood slowly, my hands resting on the back of my chair. "Marcus," I said softly, "this isn't about revenge. It's about truth. And about knowing that no matter how far someone tries to bury it, truth always finds light." Naomi covered her face and ran upstairs. Tiana followed, calling out, but stopped at the first step. She turned to me, eyes wide with confusion and hurt. "Grandma, will things ever be the same?" I shook my head gently. "They'll be honest, sweetheart. And that's better." After the guests left, Marcus sat beside me in the quiet, the ticking of the clock the only sound between us. "Ma," he said softly, "I didn't see it. I thought she was just trying to build a better life. I didn't know she'd tear someone else's down to do it." I took his hand. "We all want better, son. But some people forget that better doesn't come from stealing, it comes from healing." Outside, the porch light flickered softly. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, steady and calm. For the first time in weeks, my heart felt peaceful. I had my ring back. But more than that, I had my dignity, and my son's eyes were finally open. That night, the house felt colder than usual. After everyone had left, the lights were dim, and the smell of roasted herbs still lingered in the air, a ghost of what had been a perfect evening before the truth tore through it. I sat in the living room, the velvet box still on the coffee table, the ring glinting faintly under the lamp. Upstairs, I could hear muffled crying. Naomi's voice, broken, small, and terrified. Marcus didn't go after her. For once, he let silence do the talking. When I was younger, I used to think that justice always came with noise, with shouting, tears, and doors slamming. But real justice is quieter. It sits in the room after the lies have burned away. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. I poured myself a small cup of tea and sat back, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. Tiana came down the stairs in her pajamas, her face pale and her eyes swollen. "Grandma," she whispered. "Mom's locked in the bathroom. Dad's really mad." I set the tea down and opened my arms. "Come here, sweetheart." She climbed onto the couch beside me, curling up under my arm like she used to when she was little. I brushed her hair gently and said, "You know, sometimes people make choices they can't take back. But that doesn't mean we stop loving them. It just means we stop pretending their choices were right." Tiana nodded slowly. Mom said she just wanted to help with money. Dad's been working so much. She thought she could fix things. My chest tightened. She thought wrong. But maybe this is how she learns what really matters. The next morning, Naomi came downstairs, her eyes red and puffy. She didn't wear makeup, and for the first time in years, she looked human. No mask, no perfect image to protect. Just Naomi, a woman who had finally run out of excuses. Marcus sat at the table, coffee mug in hand, his face unreadable. I stayed quiet, letting her speak first. "Evelyn," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I thought I was helping. I thought if I sold the ring and paid off a few debts, I could surprise Marcus with something big. A business idea, something to make him proud. But it spiraled out of control." I studied her carefully. She looked like a woman standing on the edge of her own mistakes. "Naomi," I said softly, "you could have come to me. We could have found another way. That ring wasn't just gold. It held the fingerprints of every woman who wore it before me. Do you even know whose it was before mine?" She shook her head. "No. I only knew it was from Samuel." I nodded. "It belonged to my great-grandmother, Hattie May. She was born in 1889. Born free, but not equal. She worked as a laundress in Savannah, saving every penny she earned. When she finally bought that ring, it wasn't for vanity. It was her way of saying, I built something no one can take from me. It survived wars, fires, and hard times. Every woman in our family who wore it did so to remember where she came from." Naomi's tears spilled over. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's what hurts the most. You didn't think to ask." She sank into the chair, her shoulders shaking. Marcus reached across the table, but this time, not in anger. "Naomi," he said gently, "if you want to make this right, it starts with honesty. No more hiding. No more pretending." Naomi nodded slowly. "I'll make it right," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I will." For a while, no one spoke. Then I stood and placed the ring box on the table between us. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said. "I'm asking for understanding. You don't need to wear a ring to carry a legacy. You just need to act like you deserve one." Something changed in Naomi's face then, a mixture of shame and determination. She reached for my hand, hesitant. "Evelyn," she said softly, "thank you for not hating me." I smiled faintly. "Hate is heavy, dear. I've carried enough of that in my lifetime. I choose peace." Weeks passed after that dinner. The story of what happened quietly made its way through the neighborhood, as stories often do. People didn't talk about it openly, but I could feel their glances at the market, their quiet pity. Yet, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt lighter. Naomi began volunteering at the local community center, teaching financial literacy workshops with Tiana's help. She donated the designer handbags she once flaunted and started tutoring young women from low-income neighborhoods about budgeting and self-worth. She never said it outright, but I knew it was her way of returning something that didn't belong to her. And one Sunday morning, when I came over for brunch, Naomi handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, Mr. Kaplan's grandson smiling, holding a new engraving certificate. The inside of my ring now read, "To the women who built this family, may you never forget your worth." I looked up at her, tears clouding my eyes. "You did this." Naomi nodded. I wanted it to mean something again. For the first time in months, I hugged her, not out of obligation, but out of forgiveness. Because redemption doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it comes in humility, in whispered apologies, and in the quiet work of making things right. And as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, glinting off that small sapphire, I thought to myself, Samuel would have liked this ending. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. There was a new kind of stillness in our lives, one that felt like the pause between pain and healing. Naomi kept her word. She didn't try to erase what happened. She didn't run from it, either. She faced it the way a person faces a storm they caused, head down, heart open, hoping the rain would wash something clean. Every Sunday, she came over early to help me cook. At first, she stood in the kitchen doorway, hesitant, like she didn't know if she was welcome. But I'd always leave an extra apron hanging by the hook. And eventually, she stopped waiting for permission. One Sunday, as she chopped onions by the window, I said quietly, "You don't have to keep coming every week, Naomi. I know this isn't easy." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I want to. I need to learn from you, not just recipes. The way you carry yourself. The way you love people even when they don't deserve it." I looked at her hands, steady now, focused. "You can start by loving yourself that way too," I said. We spent that morning talking, really talking, the way family does when they finally stop walking on eggshells. She told me about her own childhood, how she grew up watching her mother struggle to keep food on the table, how she promised herself she'd never feel powerless again. "I thought money would fix everything," she said, her voice trembling. "When I married Marcus, I wanted to give him the world. I wanted to be more than the girl from the wrong side of Atlanta. But in trying to prove my worth, I forgot I already had it." Her honesty took me by surprise. There was no defensiveness in her tone, no attempt to justify her mistakes. Just truth, raw and painful. I reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," I said softly. "Always fighting to be seen. Always thinking love had to be earned. But love, real love, isn't a reward. It's what holds us up when everything else falls apart." Later that day, Marcus came in from the garden with Tiana, both of them laughing, holding a basket of homegrown vegetables. The sound filled the house, and for a moment, I felt time stand still. Marcus looked at Naomi and smiled. "You made your famous sweet potatoes?" Naomi grinned, a little bashful. "Trying to get close, anyway." He kissed her cheek. "You're getting there." That small gesture, the simple, easy kind of affection that doesn't need an audience, meant more than any grand apology could. It meant healing had begun. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and my tea steaming beside me. Naomi joined me after cleaning up, wiping her hands on her apron. "I went by your church this week," she said softly. "They're looking for volunteers for the holiday food drive. I signed up." I smiled. "You'll fit right in. It's not about preaching, it's about serving." She nodded, her eyes distant but peaceful. "I think I finally understand what that means." A breeze rustled through the magnolia tree, scattering petals across the porch steps. For the first time in years, I felt my heart unclench. The pain that had once burned like a wound had turned into something else. Wisdom, maybe. I thought of my husband, Samuel. He had always believed in grace more than justice, in quiet acts of kindness over loud punishment. If he could see us now, he'd smile that gentle, knowing smile of his and say, "You did right, Evelyn. You chose peace." The following week, the local newspaper ran a feature about the community center's Women Rebuilding Women initiative, an outreach program Naomi had helped launch. There she was in the photograph, standing beside a group of women from all walks of life, her hand resting on Tiana's shoulder, a soft pride in her eyes. When I saw that photo, something inside me loosened completely. Not pride in her redemption, but gratitude for what growth looks like when it's real. That evening, Naomi came over with a bouquet of gardenias. "They're for you," she said, placing them on the table. "To thank you for not giving up on me." I touched one of the blossoms and said, "Don't thank me, Naomi. Just keep growing." She smiled, and for a second, I saw what my son must have seen in her all those years ago. Not perfection, but potential. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I went to my dresser and opened the velvet box again. The ring sat there, gleaming softly in the light. I turned it over in my fingers and read the inscription Naomi had added, "To the women who built this family. May you never forget your worth. I slipped it on, the gold warm against my skin, and whispered, "Thank you, Hattie May. Your legacy's still alive." Through the window, I could see Naomi helping Marcus unload groceries from the car. They were laughing, an easy, unguarded kind of laughter. Tiana ran up behind them, wrapping her arms around their waists. It wasn't a perfect picture. It was better. It was real. Because forgiveness doesn't rewrite the past. It redeems it. And that night, as I turned off the light and looked once more at the ring on my hand, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes the people who break your heart are the same ones who end up rebuilding it, piece by piece, with trembling hands and newfound grace. The weeks rolled into months after Naomi learned the truth behind the ring she had sold. The shock of realizing that it had belonged to Hattie May, the woman whose courage had fed generations, had humbled her to the core. The story spread quietly among the family and the church. People didn't speak of it to shame her, but it was known that Naomi had learned a lesson that only grace could teach. It was mid-December in Atlanta, and Christmas lights shimmered along the quiet streets of Cascade Heights. Evelyn's small home glowed from the inside out, candles flickering on the windowsill, garlands wrapped carefully along the banister. The smell of cinnamon rolls and roasted pecans filled the air. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, wearing a red apron with tiny embroidered stars. Her silver curls framed her face softly as she stirred a pot of sweet potato soufflé. She paused for a moment and looked at her hand. On her finger was the ring, cleaned, polished, restored. Marcus had managed to track it down from the pawn shop a few months ago, and when he placed it back into his mother's palm, Evelyn had cried silently. But now, as the firelight touched the diamond, she felt peace instead of pain. For weeks, Naomi had been trying to rebuild the bridge she burned. Small things at first, calling to ask about recipes, dropping off flowers from the church market, sending cards written in her neat handwriting. Evelyn never shut her out completely, but she didn't rush forgiveness either. It had to grow, like a seed learning to trust the light again. That night, there was a knock at the door. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to find Naomi standing there, bundled in a green wool coat. Her eyes were wet, not from tears but from the cold air. She held something wrapped in gold paper. "Merry Christmas, Evelyn," she said softly. Evelyn smiled gently. "You came." "Marcus and Tiana are parking the car," Naomi replied. "I wanted to come in first." Evelyn stepped aside, and Naomi entered the warm glow of the living room. The Christmas tree sparkled with red and gold ornaments, and old gospel music played quietly on the radio. On the mantel sat framed photos, one of Evelyn and Roy on their wedding day, another of baby Marcus, and beside it, a faded black and white portrait of Hattie May. Naomi looked at that photo for a long time. The woman in it had strong eyes, the kind that saw everything and still chose kindness. "I think about her a lot," Naomi whispered. "About what she went through, and what that ring must have meant. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for not asking first." Evelyn poured 2 cups of tea and handed her one. "You've already started, Naomi. The hardest part of forgiveness is accepting that you can't rewrite what happened. You can only decide what kind of person you'll be after it." Naomi nodded, clutching her cup. "You were right about me. I was so focused on appearances, on trying to prove I belonged in Marcus's world, that I forgot who built it. It was you. It was women like Hattie May. I disrespected the very roots that feed me." Evelyn took a slow sip of tea. "You were lost in noise, baby. The world tells young women they have to shine brighter than everyone else, even if it blinds them. But the truth is, light that burns from love never fades. It just waits for you to notice it again." Naomi smiled weakly. "I want to make it right. Not just with words." She unwrapped the small box she carried and placed it on the table. Inside was a gold locket engraved with delicate initials, EMC. "It belonged to your mother," Naomi said softly. "Marcus told me you lost it years ago. I found it at a vintage jewelry store downtown. The owner said someone sold it decades ago, and it reminded me of you. I wanted to give something back that had meaning." Evelyn touched the locket with trembling fingers. This was my mother's heart right here. You found it. Naomi nodded, tears glimmering. It's not the same as the ring, but I wanted to give you something you didn't expect. Something that showed I finally understand what legacy means. Before Evelyn could reply, the door opened, and Marcus and Tiana came in with laughter and the chill of winter. The child ran into her grandmother's arms, her curls bouncing with excitement. Grandma, Daddy let me put the angel on top of the tree this year. Evelyn laughed, squeezing her tight. That's because you're the brightest star, baby girl. Marcus kissed his mother's cheek. Smells like heaven in here. You've outdone yourself again. I had some help, Evelyn said, glancing at Naomi. Naomi stepped forward. We cooked together this afternoon. Your mama let me make the macaroni, and I followed her recipe exactly. Marcus looked between them, realization dawning. You two cooked together? Evelyn smiled. Miracles still happen at Christmas. Dinner was warm and filled with laughter. The clinking of glasses, the sound of Tiana's giggles, and the soft hum of old holiday tunes stitched the room together like a quilt. Naomi moved gracefully, serving everyone, but this time there was no pretense, only gratitude. After dessert, Evelyn stood and raised her glass. To family, she said. To lessons that hurt but heal, to love that bends but never breaks, and to the women who came before us, who taught us that forgiveness is the most precious heirloom we can pass down. Naomi's eyes overflowed. She reached across the table, took Evelyn's hand and whispered, "Thank you for still calling me family." Evelyn looked around the table, the glow of the lights reflecting in everyone's eyes, the warmth of the fire, the memory of Hattie Mae's ring resting on her hand, and she knew that what was broken had been made whole again. Outside, snow began to fall, a rare Christmas gift in Atlanta. Inside, 4 generations of love found peace under one roof. The days after Christmas carried a stillness that felt sacred. The chaos of shopping, the wrapping paper, and the flashing lights faded into quiet peace. Evelyn's home smelled faintly of pine needles and sugar cookies, the remnants of joy lingering in every corner. She moved slowly through the house that morning, humming Silent Night under her breath, her robe trailing softly against the floor. On her finger, the ring shimmered faintly in the light of dawn, a symbol not just of her marriage to Roy but of everything her family had endured to arrive here. Marcus had gone back to work that week, and Naomi had taken Tiana to visit a children's museum downtown. They promised to stop by later for dinner, and Evelyn had already started her famous beef stew, letting it simmer low and slow. But the quiet allowed her to reflect on something deeper, the way that life, when left in God's hands, had a way of mending itself without needing her to push or demand. She thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If she had chosen anger instead of grace, Naomi would have remained hardened. If she had shouted or condemned, no lesson would have taken root. Instead, she had chosen patience, and in that patience, something miraculous had bloomed. Later that week, Naomi called her, her voice soft but lighter than before. "Evelyn, I was thinking, would you mind if I shared the story of the ring with my women's group at church?" Evelyn smiled. "It's your story now too, Naomi. If it helps another woman understand the value of what's passed down, not just jewelry, but love, then tell it." "I'll do it next Sunday," Naomi said. "And I want you to come." That following Sunday morning, the church on Cascade Road was filled with light streaming through stained glass windows. The choir sang softly as women took their seats in the fellowship hall. It was an informal gathering, just coffee, pastries, and open hearts. Evelyn entered quietly, dressed in a navy blue dress and pearl earrings. Naomi stood near the front, wearing a cream sweater and jeans, no longer hiding behind perfection but glowing with sincerity. When it was her turn to speak, Naomi took a deep breath. "I want to tell y'all about a ring," she began. "A ring I thought was just gold and diamonds. But it carried generations inside it. Faith, sacrifice, love, endurance. I made a mistake that nearly broke my family. I sold that ring thinking it was just a thing. What I didn't understand was that it was a story. The women leaned in as Naomi told everything, how she sold it to cover a debt, how she lied, and how she discovered the truth about Hattie Mae. She spoke of her shame, her repentance, and the grace she received. Miss Evelyn could have turned her back on me, Naomi said, her voice trembling. But she didn't. She let life teach me the hard way. And now I understand that grace isn't weakness, it's strength in its purest form. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Sister Helen, one of the elders, stood up and said, "Baby, that's not just your testimony. That's all of ours. Every one of us has sold something sacred in one way or another, our patience, our peace, our humility, and prayed for a chance to get it back. You're living proof that God gives second chances." Evelyn sat in the back with tears welling in her eyes. She had seen Naomi cry before, but never like this, never from the soul. When the women embraced Naomi afterward, Evelyn knew something permanent had shifted. The young woman who once sneered at her kitchen, her life, her roots, was now teaching others about grace. That afternoon, Marcus and Tiana joined them for lunch at the church fellowship hall. Tiana was wearing a red ribbon in her curls, her smile bright as ever. "Grandma, guess what?" she said, bouncing in excitement. "Mommy's going to start a group for girls at church. They're going to make bracelets that tell stories about women in their families." Evelyn's heart swelled. "That's beautiful, baby. What are you going to call it?" Tiana grinned. "The Legacy Circle." Naomi laughed, looking embarrassed and proud at once. "It's still an idea, but I thought maybe the girls could make something symbolic. A charm, a ring, something that helps them remember who they come from." Evelyn reached across the table and placed her hand over Naomi's. "That's exactly what this world needs. More reminders of where we come from." The following weeks were filled with small miracles. Naomi and Evelyn started cooking together every Sunday after church. They laughed over pie crusts, argued playfully about seasoning, and shared stories Evelyn had never told anyone before. Stories about how Roy proposed to her in a field of sunflowers, how Hattie Mae used to sneak extra sugar into her cornbread when times were hard, and how Evelyn's mother saved every penny to send her to beauty school before she married. Each story connected Naomi more deeply to the roots she had once ignored. She began taking notes in a small journal labeled, "Things I Don't Want to Forget." Inside, she wrote recipes, quotes from Evelyn, and memories of her own mother, who had died when Naomi was 15. "I never realized how much I missed having a mother figure," Naomi said one afternoon, stirring a pot of greens. "You've given me that." Evelyn smiled. "I never realized how much I missed having a daughter." In February, Naomi's women's group invited Evelyn to speak about legacy. The church created a small exhibit called Hands That Fed Generations. Photos of women from the community filled the walls. Grandmothers, teachers, nurses, cooks, mothers, all ordinary women who had done extraordinary things quietly. In the center of the exhibit, under a glass dome, sat Evelyn's wedding ring. A plaque beneath it read, "The ring of Hattie Mae Carter, passed through 4 generations, a symbol of endurance, faith, and love." Evelyn stood there staring at it, her heart full. Naomi placed a hand on her shoulder. "I wanted people to know it wasn't just jewelry," she said. "It's a story that never stops telling itself." The exhibit became the talk of the neighborhood. Local schools brought students to see it, and teachers used it to talk about heritage and gratitude. A local journalist even wrote an article titled, "One Woman's Ring That United a Community." As months passed, Naomi's transformation became undeniable. She left her corporate job at the real estate firm where she'd felt hollow and started teaching financial literacy to young women at the church. She said it was her way of making sure no one else ever sold something priceless out of desperation. Marcus supported her every step, proud of the woman she'd become. "You gave her grace, Mama," he said one evening as they sat on Evelyn's porch watching Tiana chase fireflies. "But I think God gave her purpose." Evelyn nodded, her voice low. "Sometimes it takes losing what's precious to find what's eternal." By the time Easter arrived, Evelyn's house had once again become the family's gathering place. The dining table, which had once felt empty, now overflowed with laughter, faith, and food. Naomi placed the Easter ham in the center of the table, while Tiana set out homemade name cards for each guest. The entire church family was there. Sister Helen, Pastor James, even some of the young girls from the Legacy Circle. As everyone joined hands for grace, Evelyn looked around the table and felt something indescribable, a wholeness she hadn't known she'd been missing. Naomi squeezed her hand gently and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Evelyn smiled. "I didn't give up, child. I just waited for you to find your way home." After dinner, when the sun began to set and the last guests left, Evelyn walked into her bedroom and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The ring glimmered softly under the lamplight. She removed it, kissed it, and placed it inside a velvet box on her dresser. Then she wrote a small note on a slip of paper and tucked it inside the box before closing it. "For Tiana, when she's old enough to understand." This ring carries the stories of every woman who chose love over anger, grace over pride, and faith over fear. She placed the box inside her nightstand drawer and whispered a prayer of thanks. The story of the ring, her story, Hattie Mae's story, Naomi's story, was now eternal. Outside, the Atlanta night was warm and quiet, the cicadas humming softly in the distance. Inside, Evelyn Carter rested in peace, knowing that her family's legacy had not just been preserved, it had been reborn. 15 years passed in what felt like the slow blink of an eye. Atlanta changed. New buildings rose downtown, old storefronts closed, younger families moved into neighborhoods that used to be quiet and familiar. Yet on that quiet street in Cascade Heights, Evelyn Carter's small brick house stayed almost exactly the same. Same white rocking chair on the porch. Same azalea bushes along the walkway. Same magnolia tree standing guard at the edge of the yard. Inside, of course, time left its fingerprints. The steps creaked a little louder. The family photos on the wall had more faces in them. And Evelyn's hair, once silver, was now a soft cloud of white. She moved a bit slower, used a cane on her bad days, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. The ring still sat in her velvet box most days. Since writing the note for Tiana, Evelyn only wore it on Sundays, on anniversaries, and on days when she needed to feel Hattie Mae's strength close to her. When she did slip it on, it felt like a steady hand on her back. A reminder that she was never walking alone. Marcus and Naomi had grown older too, though they refused to admit it. Marcus now had a little gray at his temples, which Tiana teased him about ruthlessly. Naomi had traded in some of her high heels and pencil skirts for flats and cardigans, especially on the days she worked at the church or taught budgeting classes at the community center. Tiana was no longer the little girl with bouncing curls and a red ribbon. She was 27 now, tall and graceful, with those same bright eyes, but her hair worn in thick, natural coils pulled into a high puff. She had her master's degree in social work and spent her days working with girls from rough neighborhoods, girls who reminded her of the stories her family told about their past. She still called Evelyn almost every day. Sometimes just to check in. Sometimes to ask about a recipe. Sometimes to talk through things she could not quite say to her parents yet. The bond between grandmother and granddaughter had only deepened with time. One warm afternoon in June, Tiana pulled up in front of Evelyn's house in a silver sedan, her heart beating faster than usual. She sat in the car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. There was a small box in her purse, and the weight of it felt heavier than any case file she had ever carried. She took a deep breath, grabbed her bag, and headed inside. Evelyn was in the kitchen, of course, sitting at the table with a crossword puzzle and a glass of sweet tea. Gospel music played softly in the background. When she saw Tiana, her face lit up. "There's my girl," she said. "You look like you have something on your mind." Tiana laughed, but it came out thin. "You always say that, Grandma." "That is because you always do." They sat together at the table. Evelyn poured her a glass of sweet tea without asking. Tiana took it, then placed her purse on the table and slid the small box out. It was white with a satin ribbon tied around it. "I have news," Tiana said. Big news. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You quitting your job to move to Paris or something? Tiana snorted. No, ma'am. I am not leaving you with Daddy and Mama to deal with alone. Good. Then what is it? Tiana opened the box. Inside was a simple engagement ring. A round diamond on a delicate gold band. Not flashy, not huge, but elegant and full of intention. His name is Andre, she said quietly. We have been dating for 3 years. You met him once at church. Tall, quiet, always offering to carry things for you. The one with the deep voice, Evelyn said. Polite. Listens more than he talks. I remember. He asked me to marry him last night, Tiana continued. I said yes. We wanted to tell you in person before we told everyone else. Evelyn took the box and studied the ring. It is lovely. How do you feel? Happy, Tiana said. Then, after a pause, and scared. Evelyn looked up. Scared of what? Of repeating mistakes, Tiana said, her voice dropping. Of getting so caught up in trying to build something new that I forget the foundation it stands on. Of turning into someone who sees people as status, not as family. I have heard the story about the ring my whole life. About Mom selling it and you choosing Grace. I do not ever want to be the one on the wrong side of that kind of story. Evelyn sat back and took a breath. Andre make you feel like you have to prove yourself all the time. No, Tiana said quickly. That is not it. He respects what I do. Loves our family. He grew up in a working-class home too. His mama still works at Grady Hospital. He is not like that. I think this is more about me. About the weight of what gets passed down. She glanced toward Evelyn's bedroom door, where the ring sat hidden but known. The wedding ring. Our family's ring. The one that belonged to Hattie Mae. The one Mom sold. Evelyn nodded slowly. You think about that ring a lot, do you not? Yes, Tiana said. I think about how one decision almost shattered everything, and how your choice to respond with love changed the path. I keep wondering what I am going to pass down. If I am ready to carry the kind of legacy you and Hattie Mae carried. Evelyn stood up without a word. She walked to her bedroom, moving with the slow steadiness of age, and returned with the familiar velvet box in her hands. She placed it in front of Tiana. Open it, she said. Tiana's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. The ring gleamed inside, the light catching the slope of the diamond in a way that felt both humble and regal. The gold band was worn in places, full of years of living. Every woman in our family who wore this ring lived a real life, Evelyn said. Hattie Mae wore it while she cleaned houses for rich folks who never bothered to learn her full name. My mama wore it while she sewed clothes late into the night. I wore it while raising your daddy and working at the salon when money was tight. This ring has seen tears, arguments, miracles, disappointments, and joy. It is not a symbol of perfection. It is a symbol of commitment. Tiana swallowed. Commitment to what? To God, Evelyn said. To family. To staying when it would be easier to run. To choosing to forgive when it would feel better to hold a grudge. To loving yourself enough to tell the truth. That is what this ring belongs to. She reached out and touched Tiana's cheek. Your mother's mistake is part of this ring's story now too. Not as a stain, but as a warning. And what she did afterward, how she chose to change, how she chose to serve, that is also part of the story. You are not starting from scratch, baby. You are stepping into a river that has been flowing long before you got here. Tiana stared at the ring for a long moment. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Evelyn smiled. I am saying it is time. Time for what? For this ring to find its next hand. Tiana shook her head. Grandma, I cannot. You are still here. It is still yours. It will always be mine in spirit, Evelyn said. Just like it will always be Hattie Mae's. But the ring itself was never meant to sit in a box. It was meant to live on somebody's hand. To move into new kitchens, new homes, new seasons. I have worn it enough years. It is your turn. Tiana's eyes overflowed. What if I mess up? You will, Evelyn said simply. Everybody does. The goal is not to live without mistakes. It is to choose what you do after you make them. That is what separates foolishness from wisdom. Tiana took a slow breath. If I accept it, I want to do it right. I want to honor you. And Mama. And Hattie May. Then put it on, Evelyn said. Tiana gently removed the ring from the box. For a moment, it felt too heavy in her fingers. Then she slid it onto her left hand, just above the simple engagement ring Andre had given her. The old gold and new gold sat together, side by side, like two generations holding hands. When she looked up, Evelyn was watching her with tears shining in her eyes. Fits just right, Evelyn murmured. That ring knows how to find the right finger. That evening, the entire family gathered for dinner. Marcus brought ribs, Naomi brought a big salad, and Tiana made cornbread using Evelyn's recipe from years back. Andre joined them, nervously straightening his shirt and offering to set the table 3 separate times. Once everyone had a plate and the table was full of steam and color, Tiana stood up. Grandma, can I say something before we eat? Evelyn nodded. Go ahead, baby. Tiana held up her left hand. The diamond caught the light, but it was the older ring beside it that drew every eye. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Marcus leaned forward, his expression softening. Grandma gave me this today, Tiana said. She told me it was time for the ring to find its next hand. I want y'all to know something. I am not taking this lightly. This ring has seen a lot. Generations of love. Generations of struggle. And one big mistake that almost broke us, but ended up pulling us closer instead. Naomi wiped a tear silently. I am about to start my own family, Tiana continued, and I want our future kids to know where they come from. Not just the good parts. All of it. I want them to know about Hattie May. About great-grandma. About you, Grandma. About Mom's mistake. About how she made it right. I want them to know that this ring does not just belong to brides. It belongs to every woman in this family who chose to get back up after she fell. She looked at Naomi. Mom, I want you to know I do not carry this ring in judgment of you. I carry it because you taught me what happens when you forget your own worth, and then remember it again. That is just as important a lesson as anything Grandma ever taught me. Naomi broke then. She covered her face with her hands and let the tears come. Marcus pulled her into his arms. Evelyn sat quietly, letting the weight of the moment settle. After dinner, when the dishes were washed and the house had grown quiet, Tiana sat outside on the porch steps. Andre joined her, his hand resting gently on her knee. You sure you want to wear that ring too? He asked. We can stick with the one I gave you if it feels like too much pressure. Tiana smiled. It does feel like pressure. But the good kind. The kind that reminds you to watch your steps and guard your heart. This ring is not a fashion statement. It is a promise to the women who came before me. Andre nodded slowly. Then I will honor it too. All of it. The history. The pain. The beauty. Under the soft Atlanta night sky, lit only by a few porch lights and the glow from the kitchen window, Tiana laid her head on his shoulder. She thought about the future, about a small house somewhere not too far from this one, about children gathered around a table eating recipes that came from worn index cards, about a day when she might open a velvet box and slide this ring onto another young woman's hand. Months later, on her wedding day, the church was full. Not extravagant, not dripping in gold or crystal, but full of people who mattered. The air hummed with joy. Naomi helped adjust Tiana's veil with steady hands. Evelyn sat in the front pew, her cane resting beside her, a proud light in her eyes. When Tiana reached the altar, Andre squeezed her hands gently. As they exchanged vows, The new wedding band Andre placed on her finger settled snugly between the engagement ring he had given her and the old ring of Hattie May. 3 circles of gold. 3 promises woven together. After the ceremony, as guests laughed and hugged and took photos under the oak trees, a young cousin pointed to Tiana's hand. "That ring looks old," she said. "Where did you get it?" Tiana smiled and knelt to the child's height. "This ring belonged to your great-great-great-grandmother," she said. "Her name was Hattie May. She was a woman who worked hard, prayed harder, and never forgot who she was, no matter how the world treated her. This ring has been passed down through the women in our family who are willing to love deeply and learn from their mistakes." The little girl's eyes widened. "Will I get to wear it one day?" "Maybe," Tiana said, "if you live in a way that honors it." That night, back at Evelyn's house after the reception, the family gathered again, tired and happy. Evelyn sat in her chair, her feet up, watching Tiana move around the kitchen in her wedding dress with a towel tied over it to protect the lace. "You know," Evelyn said softly, "when Naomi sold that ring all those years ago, I thought the story of it might end with me. I never imagined it would become the very thing that pulled us together and kept us honest." Tiana walked over and took her grandmother's hand. "Stories do not end when something is broken," she said. "They just change chapters." Evelyn smiled, her eyes misty but peaceful. "You sound just like Hattie May when you talk like that. She always used to say, 'Life will crack you open, but it is what you pour out afterward that tells the truth about who you are.'" Later, when the house was finally quiet and everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Evelyn sat alone for a while. The sounds of the city hummed faintly outside. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. "For the ring," she said. "For the women. For the mistakes. For the mercy." In that gentle stillness, she felt it again, the presence of those who had gone before her. Hattie May. Her own mother. Roy. The generations whose names might be forgotten in history books but were written in the hearts of every child and grandchild still breathing. The ring was no longer just a reminder of what had been lost and found. It had become a living covenant, circling through time, binding each woman who wore it to a legacy far greater than gold. And as long as it sat on the hand of someone who understood that love is more powerful than pride, that grace can rebuild what greed destroys, and that forgiveness is the strongest kind of inheritance, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. The story of that ring would never truly end. It would be told in kitchens and living rooms, whispered at bedtime, taught in youth groups and women's circles. It would echo every time a young woman chose wisdom over desperation, or a mother chose mercy over rage. Somewhere in Atlanta years from now, another girl would slip that ring onto her finger and ask the same question. Who did this belong to? And someone would smile and say, "Sit down, baby. Let me tell you about the women who wore it before you."